The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for today's Hackin Cast with Ian Meyer. We are very excited to be here today. If you aren't already on our Discord server, I would definitely recommend joining us there now. The Discord server is where we do all of our chat for our Hackin Casts. And if you have any questions for our presenter, they're in our Discord server as well. So you can join us there in the live chat channel. It's the one with the little bullhead. And after the webcast, feel free to hang out in the server and check out all the other channels that we have. We have some job opportunity channels along with some LinkedIn and Twitter connection channels as well. So it's just a great place to hang out with the community. And Ian, it's nice to see you. I know that the last time we all got to see each other was only a little while ago in Reno. So.
That's true, and it was awesome. So I had a blast. I had an absolute blast, and you see, I like that you've got the whole cat ear motif as well, because that's how people could spot you. Like, go find the person with the cat ears.
Yes.
So that's excellent.
Yeah.
So I am over in the live chat channel. I'm going to dump a link in there right now. For those who maybe are on early, I see a few people starting to join early here to have a little bit of a chatty chat. But I'm going to put the links to the slides. So for those of you who are here early, you get to see some of the magic.
Yes, and if you're new to Wild West Hacking Fest, thank you so much for being here today. This is not the actual start of the webcast yet. We'll be getting started in about 20 minutes here. Until then, this is what we like to call pre-show banter. As we like to say, we show up early because you show up early, and then you show up early because we show up early. It's that vicious cycle we all love so much that we made a t-shirt about it. You can check out the Spearfish General Store, and you'll see we have a nice t-shirt called I Only Show Up for the Pre-Show Banter. And we'll share a link to that in the Discord for everybody as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I have that shirt. I almost wore it today as like an ironic joke, like I show up for more than the pre-show banter.
You are the pre-show banter.
Pre-show banter. I was trying to figure out a way to incorporate in. I like to do props, because they kind of speak to people, and I was trying to figure out a way. I'm gonna break something doing this. This is one of those things from TikTok. Hold on. What? Yeah, there we are. The cane that pops open, and I'm like, I can't figure out how to integrate that into the talk. So instead, we've got Rice Krispies and riding crops and stamps. I don't know.
All right.
I don't know. Now, so this goes over on the bed. Okay, there we
go. Just threw it up into nothing.
Magic. I didn't realize there was going to be magic tricks. That's sweet.
I thought about it. I wanted to grab my Svengali deck, but it just didn't work into the talk. Maybe in a later version, we'll try that. No, I love that shirt though. As a matter of fact, it actually makes an appearance in my slides, come to think of it.
Sweet.
It absolutely does.
So Megan, Shelby, and Ian was with us in Reno. What was your favorite part of Reno? Just out of curiosity.
Hugs.
People?
Yeah, people seeing real humans. But yeah, no, it was great. It was nice to be able to see people that I love and care about, and doing neat things and continuing the vision, and it's just a really great place to be, and all of y'all make it possible. So I try and force myself in everywhere I can.
Well, it's an easy force there, Ian. We're always happy to have you, and we're excited to welcome you back to Deadwood for your workshop. I know it was well attended and people were really excited. You want to talk about your workshop a little bit? What people will learn?
That'd be really cool. Yeah, and I mentioned it at the end. I have a slide called Hype Beast, which is about B-Sides Orlando and then also Wild West Hackin Fest Deadwood. But yeah, I run a workshop called Advanced Cubicles and Compromises. It's based off of what John Strand and the teams at Black Hills Information Security built some time ago, and it grew into it was maybe one of the predecessors of Cubicles and Compromises. But the whole idea is you've got this 1D20. This is one of the Black Hills 1D20 actually, and every time you're doing an incident response exercise, and you say, "Oh, we're going to load from backups." You roll the dice and see if the backups worked. And it helps you kind of figure out what of your controls work, right? So I took that idea and expanded it and said, hey, John, hey, Jason, hey, Belda, hey, everybody, would you mind if I ran a workshop like this? And it is a workshop that runs just like a D&D campaign. It comes with a player's guide. You build your character, your company, using NIST CSF framework. And you go through and you say, I found, I'm not looking at my camera. I got to fix that before the show. So anyway, you go through and you build your company. And during the exercise, we lay out 5 incidents. And as you build the company based on controls that you can purchase, like weapons and attributes and whatnot, then you have to defend against the thing that come up during the incident. So it's really fun. I make a lot of video injects. Sometimes there's props there too. If you find my teaching or speaking style interesting here and you want to know how to run an engaging incident response exercise, please come out and hang out in Deadwood. It's a pile of fun, and it is one of the only towns on the planet for about 3 days. The population is vastly majority hacker. No, I rode the bull technically twice at Wild West Hackin Fest in Way West. And the first time, it's so funny because the operator, they look at you and they're like, okay, we're going to put you on, we're going to crank it up. And then when they see you like fall flat on your face, they're like, okay, we're going to put this in the, get back on. And it's like a little kiddie ride. You're like, woo. It's still hard though. Even in like keyboard, you're like,
Yeah.
I'm working.
I heard the saddle was really slick.
It was. It was
Oh, yeah.
really slippery.
I don't have a reference for comparison, so I'm just going to say yes.
Yeah, a regular saddle's a lot easier to hang on to. I can attest to that. That was not the easiest.
Got it.
I'll tell you what, our cowboy Carl, he was so fun. We did kind of a pre photo op with him, and he was like, he's like up there with his robe, and then he's like doing a tumble off, just for the photo. It was awesome. Totally awesome. I was looking to see if I can find a picture of him. I know it's on our pictures, but that was so cool.
And for those listening, for those who are out in Reno or who weren't specifically, we had to try and escape Reno, and it was harder than you think. The heat was causing planes to not go. I guess Southwest had problems too. It was bonkers. 27 hours.
And then it didn't help that there were storms in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was like a perfect storm of strandedness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was something crazy.
Hey, I just want to do a shout out here and remind everybody to, in addition to Wild West Hackin Fest Deadwood, we have pre-conference training, but we also have, Antisiphon also has a great lineup of training classes, and I'm going to post the link in here. We have John Doe's Pay What You Can trainings. We also have a new one. Chris Britton just put up a packet class. We also have our friends in the UK, Owen and Will, who are doing a password cracking, as well as Joff Fire, who is doing, can never remember what the name of it is, guys.
Isn't
It's
the
a very long name. It's
Yeah.
the C2 implant development something.
Well, it's regular expressions, your new lifestyle.
Oh, that's the Pay What You Can. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we also have a great lineup. I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat. So make sure you get over there and take a look at that. We do great training, high quality content at affordable pricing.
Yes, and when you take one of our training classes, for every paid class, and if you pay $195 or higher on a Pay What You Can class, you get 6 months of free access to our cyber range, which is a really awesome tool you can use to kind of, further your education. And you also earn different levels for the amount of questions that you answer that help you earn different levels in our ACE-T certification, which we'll have more developing on that shortly as well.
So hi everybody, I'm Ian Meyer, and I'm looking over here. We're almost to 400, 395 in the stream. So thank you for coming to hear me talk a little bit about being technically compliant. And this is evolving the offensive capabilities of your compliance team. Now, I have a very interesting kind of road into this, and which is why I find this topic so, I don't know, appealing. And hopefully when we get out of it, you'll leave saying, wait a minute, yeah, we do kind of need to make compliance more technical. We need to make it so that it's more available and ready and actionable and not just a checkbox. But we'll talk about all that in a minute. So who am I? Right? In case you haven't met me, in case you haven't seen me talk, in case you're not from Central Florida, I am Ian Meyer. In my day job is an associate director for security assurance at Vacations Worldwide. So that is the company that split off of Marriott a while ago, back in 2011, and we do vacation ownership, we do resorts, things to that nature. So I love that place. Some of the folks that are watching, hello everybody. When I'm not doing that, I'm a course director at Full Sail University. I'm the president of B-Sides Orlando. More on that in a minute. And during the pre-show banter, you heard me mention that I've won some of the slideshow roulette at Wild West Hackin Fest. We'll just jump down to that one because I was the first place winner for Who's Slide at DEF CON back in 2019. So that should give you an idea about to experience. So with that said, I'm not going to go through the rest of it because I only include this so that later, if you try and show it to someone, you're like, who is that lunatic explaining things? The one with the nunchucks and the pre-show banter shirt, that's them. So if you do not have the slides, I know some of you are in there, Google Drive is blocked or Bitly's blocked or whatever it is. But if you're not, if you're at home, whatnot, or if you want to just pull them up on your phone, I've got a QR code there. You can do that. I often make the bad joke about just accept the USC, the bad certificate, all that stuff, but I find it's getting old. So it's starting to trail off. But go ahead, and if you need that, all the slides that you're looking at right now will be there. So if you need to zoom in on some of the text, you can. If you want to click on some of the links to look at them while I'm talking, you can. That kind of stuff. Shelby also put it in the slides channel on the Discord. So if you are connected to Discord, you can get them there as well. So what do I mean by technically compliant, right? Now, immediately, there's really a couple ways to think about this, right? We can think about it saying, yeah, we're technically compliant. And I think we've all been there at a company or organization or something like that, where you say, well, if you think about it this way, technically, we're compliant. Nobody likes that, right? Especially if you're a technical person or you're someone who's really proud of the work you put in. You're a craftsman in your art, right? You don't want to be technically compliant. You want to be compliant. You want to put the best forward. You want to really understand it. I do risky management. I've got, yeah, it is a QR code that goes to a Bitly link that goes to a Google Drive. So totes safe. That said, so technically compliant, right? We don't want to be technically compliant. We want to be technical and compliant. We want to use technical skills to go through and understand compliance, to test it, to understand it. And we're going to get into some of that because what we know about compliance, what most people think of, right, is they think of three core things. And I forgot I've got my headset on. So you've got, the one person who comes in and they're like, yes, we are the compliance officer. We are going to go through. We noticed that you did not have the right function inside of there for creating your usernames. Significant finding! That's one type. We don't like those. Those are no fun, right? Because they go through and they want to go through and tell you, this is exactly how it can be done. You're violating the policy. Well, you know what? You might not be. The spirit of the rule, think about if you've never dealt with PCI, they talk about having AV and endpoint protection, right? If you've got a tool that's behavioral analysis or all these other things, you've got to explain to QSA why these things are acceptable. They meet the spirit of the rule, right? And that's really just a pain to do. So you've got that auditor to deal with. Then you've got the other one, right? Where they come in and they're just out of college and they're coming from the, I've got here my KP Waterhouse Deloitte and Young compliance check sheet. And they say, I'm told this was fine. And no, this is not fine. We're going to need to bill all the hours. And I'm not saying anything like that is wrong. Everyone's got to start somewhere. And a lot of those people, those companies are excellent. They're amazing. I really don't mean to pick on them. But those are some of the people that you end up dealing with, right? And then we deal with the reality of the situation, right? Which is this rubber stamp, right? the rubber stamp. Management accepts the risk, right? You go through and say, management accepts the risk. We don't want that either, right? We want to go through and create controls that work, and all that smudge on there, so that's fine. We want to create controls that work, that we can test, that we know work over and over again and repeatedly, right? So how do we do that? How do we go through and do that? Now, I'm going to give a warning a couple times during this talk, right? This is my unpopular opinion warning because I know inside of the Discord, and I know the people that gravitate towards Black Hills, you've got all these amazing penetration testers and incredibly technical people. And what I'm about to say might not necessarily appeal to them, but when you look inside your heart of hearts, you'll know it to be true. But if for whatever reason this kind of thing scares you, please, for the next few moments, just place your hands over your ears, whisper, leet, 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 leet. And when you see me hold up the seminal album of the Hackers soundtrack, which now meets my legally required mentions of hackers inside of the talk, when you see that, you may return safely. Are you ready? Okay. First unpopular opinion. A technical audit of controls is more effective at protecting an organization than any penetration test. And you're going to say, no, this can't be possible. The penetration testers are amazing, and they are. But a penetration test shows you that you've had a problem, where the problems are that they were able to exploit. What it doesn't tell you necessarily is what controls failed. Now, they can include, hey, the only way we would have been able to do this if these things weren't working. But it doesn't tell you which things in your organization didn't work, what led to that failure. And that, by the way, is the crux of this entire talk. Heresy, I see East River too. So that is the crux of this entire talk. How do we make sure that we know the controls are functioning as designed? Because most of the time, if the controls were there and working properly, you'd stop them. And you're going to say, no, that can't be true. That happens all the time. Well, yeah, we know how to solve these problems, and we'll get into more of that in a second. So I also have to have at least one meme. It's the only one you'll get this entire thing. So tell me the truth. I'm ready to hear it. And like I said, a technical audit of compliance is more effective at improving the outcomes of security outcomes than a penetration test. I'm sorry, Mary Jane. It's true. Like I said, if you go through and can claim to be 100% compliant with the CIS benchmarks and PCI, which, by the way, is completely impossible. But if you can go through and claim that, and you can prove it, most penetration testers will tell you that that would shut them down. Just proper network segmentation, the inability to pivot, which is defined and called out. If that was there, you'd be good. So how do we get there, right? How do we do that? Generally, you have compliance and you have technical and compliance and technical, and these two people don't meet. And there's a lot of work being done by Bryson Fort and George and all the folks over at Scythe and amazing people across the board. Sands is doing work in purple teaming. The name goes on and on and on. But there's a team that often gets left out, and that's a compliance team. We can make them more technical. So, which leads us into unpopular opinion warning 2. Which, if you're still, whispering leet, leet, leet into your ears, please continue. Unpopular opinion warning 2. We don't need more hackers and hoodies. We need more forensic accountants. And you know what? That's going to sound really boring to everybody. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that everyone has to go become a forensic accountant. What it does mean is we need more people obsessed with the details before there's a problem. Have you ever talked to somebody who really loves accounting? Really loves accounting? Have you ever talked to them? They love making sure that every single decimal point in place, every number in their columns, all of it adds up. They love it. Imagine if you threw them into an environment, taught them IT controls, and said, please make sure every single system in our environment always has EDR, always is updated, always has the right signatures, always has naming inside of the CMD, always has these things, and when it doesn't, find out why that didn't happen. That would absolutely blow away most security programs. It would turn them into juggernauts. Because we get busy, you know? We get busy, we forget. We go, oh, I'm going to get to that later. It's a change control in the middle of the night. We're going to update that. There was a tweet, I forget, that went out, and I was like, we'll fix that tomorrow. I think it was the wire with it was like a wire in a plug behind a wall. It was just a raw wire into a regular 110 US voltage plug. And somebody tweeted, and they're like, oh, well, we'll fix that tomorrow after we close the change. And I'm like, and tomorrow never came. Well, that's the hackers, right? Yeah, Zane, that's exactly who I'm thinking of when I'm talking about this, the forensic accountant. So in the Discord chat, we've got Ben Affleck as the accountant. So it is now safe for you to return. If you do not like the unpopular opinions, please return. We now have the seminal album, 1990s movie, Hackers soundtrack. So who's this guy? Now, a lot of you in the Discord, go ahead and shout it out if you know it. But this individual was one of the biggest criminals in the United States. Their name is well known far and wide. And I know this runs a little bit behind, so I'll say it, and then we'll see if anybody gets it. But this is Al Capone. Al Capone, by all intents and purposes, bad guy, right? Mobster, murderer. I mean, just generally thought of as not a really great person. And one of the biggest criminals ever in the United States. If they were operating today, do you think it's this person that would take them down? Do you think it's, cybersecurity, sitting in a room, making CVEs, creating really cool exploits, red team going at it? And again, I'm not picking on anybody. What I'm saying is it's not that person. It's this person. It's the accountant sitting in the office, because what they went down for was tax evasion. It was the IRS. It was fraud. That's what they could get them on. Think about all your modern ransomware campaigns right now and how, hey, all these people are protected. They're committing crimes. They're doing this. And then the only time they start to get attention is when they poke the wrong bear. And in this particular case, the IRS is the wrong bear, especially at the time. They were looking for something high profile, and that was it. They could get them on federal charges. So how do we get more of these? How do we get more of these accountants, these people that are interested in this? Well, yeah, we do need to make them more technical, but we need more of this person. Now, I have a lot of kids. I have 4 kids, right? And they are very technical. They've all got tablets. They've all got this. They've all got that. Some of them got computers, right? Ever try and lock them out of something? For those of you who have children, tell me in the Discord, whatever. Have you ever tried to say, oh, I've turned on parental controls, or looked for something to say, I'm too busy. I need to lock them out of these different things. I need to keep them away from different material. I don't want them playing Roblox anymore. They spend $4,000 buying skins for their thing, whatever it is. I'm definitely speaking to someone listening. Those children know how to get past all your controls because they're infinitely curious. They have all the time in the world on their hands. They don't know how the technology works. So think about that. They don't know how the technology works. They are not going to explain to you a TCP stack. They are not going to explain to you how an IPS IDS works. They are not going to explain to you how data modeling works for an AI. They're not going to explain to you any of the stuff that's being sold to you to say, this is the panacea. They're going to figure out that if they click the help menu 7,000 times, it calls a buffer overflow that allows them to pull up a browser and do whatever they want. That's what they're going to figure out. That's what we need. We need those people just as much as we need red team, just as much as we need other folks. We need compliance people that want to be technical, that want to learn some of the technical tricks, that want to learn some of the things that might lead them into a technical role, but allow them to address many of the systemic problems, the really hard stuff. Breaking stuff's easy, people. Fixing it's hard. Have you ever done demolition on a house or a remodel? Man, sledgehammer on tile all day long. Laying the tile back down properly? Yeah, no, that's no fun. That's boring. That's no good. So we need more of those people. So how do we build them, right? Well, we got to kind of look back, and you saw this in the abstract that went up on the website, right? Nurses. Let's think about nurses for a second. I promise you, we're about to get out of the history of this and actually get into some detail. But think about nurses, right? If you knew nurses, and I'm going to tell a story quickly about my wife and her mother, whom I love both of them very, very much. I'm very lucky to have in-laws I like. So with that said, my wife's mother was a nurse growing up, and told my wife all day long, don't become a nurse. The pay is awful. The hours are terrible. This, that, and the other. Well, that was her experience on the screen, right? Being a nurse and, growing up, not necessarily, this is 1943, World War II, but in the 60s, not terribly long after, nurses were still not thought of as the same type of professional as a doctor. In the same way that compliance people aren't necessarily thought of in the same regard as a penetration tester or a red teamer. They are completely different skill sets, but just like nursing evolved, compliance folks have to choose a different road. I don't think that checkbox compliance, like I showed here, or the rules lawyer that says, oh, I found something that is now a significant finding because your naming convention was wrong and your policy says this. Nobody cares about that. Hackers don't care about that, right? You need someone who can go in and say, these are the controls that protect us, and this is how we test them. And that's where the technical compliance evolution needs to come in. We're already seeing that. I'm going to talk about this in security chaos engineering. We're already seeing that happening in the engineering and control field. Now we need to look at it from a compliance standpoint. We had nurses who were, working just as hard and providing incredible healthcare results for people, saving lives. But it wasn't until later on when we realized, hey, we can't build more penetration testers. Like, we just can't. Like, we can't build them at the rate that we need them. We have to build a pipeline that lets them go from, an assistant to a nurse, to a registered nurse, to a nurse practitioner, to a nurse anesthetist, to a whatever, to specialize in these things. And then suddenly it's like, wow, they're incredibly technical. Where did that start? Well, it starts when that road diverges in the woods and we decide to make those people, like nurses, more technical. So, I'm going to tell you a little campfire story. So why is this something that's so, I don't know, passionate for me? Like, why does it just ring all my bells? A few years ago, I was working in engineering. Now at this point, like 7 years ago, I was working in engineering. I was doing security engineering, and I got tired. I got absolutely tired of saying, well, this is what we need to do. And the business saying, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not going to deploy this IPS IDS that way. It will break things. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're not going to follow this best practice. And I'm not going to go into details as to what company it was, but it was a number of years ago. And so I left. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go work in compliance. Those people seem to have some teeth. I've noticed when they come to me saying they need screenshots and this and this and this and this, that they get them. And if I don't get them on time, I get yelled at. So maybe I go over there because somebody is listening to the compliance team. So I went and found an organization that, I'd already been working a little bit in compliance. Like my role at that organization was a security engineer, but I was like the liaison between audit and compliance and whatnot to do all this stuff. So I was like, okay, let me pivot that experience and see where I can go. And what I quickly learned was what a few people tried to tell me. They're like, why are you doing this? It's no better over here. And I said, no, but I have rules I can follow, I have frameworks I can say, no, you have to do this. This is a regulation. And really what you found at organizations is what a lot of people already knew, which was we're going to be technically compliant. We're going to do the bare minimum. We're going to try and figure out how we can skirt that line and say we're compliant. And, we'll figure out the rest as we go. Now, I'm not saying this is done maliciously. I'm really not. What I'm saying is businesses have certain needs. And if they're not serving their customer and something is slowing that down, they can go out of business, right? So in that role, I discovered a few things, and I wouldn't change that path at all. At the time, it was like I wandered out into the woods and I was like, I'm going to change something and I'm going to do better. And then I got mauled by bears. And I was like, I do not like being mauled by bears. I would like to go back to my roots. And I did. But I learned something during that time that was very valuable. I learned a phrase called accurate and complete. Now, if you've never heard this term before, you've probably never worked with auditors closely. But accurate and complete. So what does it mean, right? What does it mean for something to be accurate and complete? Well, we need to go through and think about a control. Hey, bears, Mr. They're here. We need to think about what does accurate and complete mean, right? What does it mean to take a control and say, not only do we know that this control is functioning as designed, that EDR is deployed everywhere, that every endpoint is encrypted. We know it because we can test the control. We can look at things like, here's the entire CMDB, or go all the way back to finance. Here are all the laptops we purchased and are depreciating. Let's identify each one of those and make sure that data is encrypted on them and that they are in the CMDB, and that we can validate that by GPO and take it. That's how you know that data is accurate. How do you know it's complete? Well, you actually heard me say some of it. You can go out and look at all your sources of truth and say, do I know that all the devices in my organization are there? And people complain about procurement all the time and the hoops you have to jump through. But if you leverage that and say, well, wait a minute, the only way I can write a check for laptops is by going through this SAP system. So vis-a-vis, habeas, pro bono, corpus, whatever. If you've got those issues and you've got those in the system, and you say, oh, wait, here's everything we've ever bought. Now let's go find them. Are they encrypted? Accuracy and completeness is making sure that not only can you show a sample set to say, yeah, here's a couple laptops, we encrypt them, but you can prove that you do it on everything, everywhere. You've gone one step further. You've built a methodology to check that your assumptions are correct, not just that the control exists. So let's get into that, right? So this is the PCAOB, right? The Public Accounting, I always forget the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. This is one of the things I learned at that time. I said, well, wait a minute. What does it mean to be accurate and complete, right? So AS 1105 audit evidence. I'm going to read this in my best legalese. Tests the security, tests the accuracy and completeness of the information, or tests the control over the accuracy and completeness of the information, and evaluates whether the information is sufficiently precise and detailed for the purposes of the audit. Now, most of you that have worked in security or any job, really all this is saying is, do you know that you checked everything? And do you have methods in place to make sure that if you miss something that you catch it? It's really what it's saying, right? And then how do you test those things? Now, why does this, and I saw someone in the Discord chat say it speaks to the board, and forgive me, I saw it scroll by there. Yes, this speaks to the board. Do you know why this speaks to the board? This speaks to the board because this is one of the primary examples by which Sarbanes-Oxley auditors, and this is the regulation that governs over a publicly traded company, this is the way Sarbanes-Oxley auditors look at evidence. They say, okay, well, we're, what did I say, KP Waterhouse, Lloyd and Young, and we need to show that we did our due diligence on these controls. Thanks, Enron. Really appreciate that. For those of you also who work in the industry, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act can also be described as the Full Employment of Auditors Act. It is an absolute boon to the audit industry in that if you want to be a publicly traded company, you need to prove that you're not cooking the books. And that bleeds down to information security because so many of those financial controls are now technical, right? This is another reason why compliance people need to become more technical. No longer are you going through a bunch of paper receipts, making sure that everything lines up. It's, okay, the Oracle database says that we have, 1.5 million in reserve. How do we know that? How are we sure of that? How do we know that someone didn't change it? Now, the testing part, that's the part that's actually really interesting to me, right? Because now the board knows, hey, we're a publicly traded company. And one of the fun things about SOX is it's one of the only ways that I know of or have seen where an executive can be charged criminally. They might do actual jail time. You got Bernie Madoff, you got all these other folks. The SEC is really one of the, just like the IRS took down Capone, the SEC is really the only one that has effectively taken financial crimes people at Wall Street and put them behind bars, right? So executives know this. They know, hey, if I lie on this and I'm caught, like I'm going to really real jail, not slap on the wrist jail. Here's your fine jail, going to jail. We can have a separate discussion about how effective that is, but I digress. Now, if we're going to go through and test these things, right? Let's see. We need to attack the control. we need to attack compliance, right? So this is where we start to blend these things in, right? This is where we start to go through and say, well, wait a minute. We've got a red team here, and it's like the Reese's peanut butter cups. You got red team in my compliance. You got compliance in my red team, and now you got, a Reese's compliance cup. With that said, we need to attack the controls. Forget going through and saying, oh, we've got an account here that wasn't disabled. Great, that's a finding in the pen test. Check. Okay, that gives you something to go work on, and that's great. But why did the account get left behind? What compliance control would have caught it or should have caught it? And what failed about that control that let it happen? And then more importantly, how do we put tests in place? Not more attestations, not, oh, we're going to put a whole new control in place. This is my least favorite thing in the world. You'll have an auditor go, well, now we're going to add another control. The first control didn't work. What makes you think the second one will? There was nothing wrong with the premise of the first control. It just didn't work. So now you have to fix it. And that concept is not one that generally has applied. Technical audit to go through and say, why did the control fail, is generally just stopped with a period of, it failed because it didn't work, and here's the evidence. But why? Right? So let's talk about this for a second. What is this? Rice Krispie treats, right? It's generic, which is kind of, I realized later on, I'm like, the generic even speaks more to controls, because it's like, oh, you've got all these controls. Okay. And everybody uses them. So they're generic. But anyway, so Rice Krispie treats, right? Or Rice Krispies, they will be Rice Krispie treats at some point. Now, you can hear them in there. They're shaking. Cool. So if I'm an auditor and I say, excellent, we need to see your strategic reserve of Rice Krispie treats, and we say, yes, we have them here. Here's a photograph. It is taken on July 14th at 1:29 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll notice that it is the regulation size box of Rice Krispie treats. You will notice that it has a picture that is enlarged for texture. And if we shake the box, you can see we've tested to make sure there is Rice Krispie treats in there. And they will say, excellent, we will put this in our evidence and we will move on. Okay. The Rice Krispie treats got in there somehow, right? At some factory, somewhere, someone, configured a machine to do that. So let's go through and figure out what's actually in here. Okay, that seemed heavier than Rice Krispie treats. Okay, so we do have some Rice Krispie treats. Cool. We've also got some Cheetos. We've got a pretzel. That's good. Oh, a ball bearing. Oh, that's good. A ball bearing. Got some screws. Oh, some dice. That's good. Yeah. How'd that happen? We saw the box. We bought the box, said Rice Krispie treats, sounded like Rice Krispie treats. We bought it from a store that sold Rice Krispie treats. How did that happen? How do we make sure that that doesn't happen in the future? Well, believe it or not, in manufacturing, this is a very well-known concept. Making sure that product that goes out is what it says it is, that someone didn't poison the supply chain, et cetera. Does that sound at all familiar to anyone who's dealing with ransomware events recently? This can all be done with compliance. But you have to create technical controls that test that. How would you sample that coming into the environment? Would you remove it from the packaging? Would you test it to make sure that, yeah, it looks like Rice Krispie treat? There's a whole thing going on right now with Subway where it's in the news where someone took Subway tuna and said, this isn't tuna. It doesn't contain the genetic material to be tuna. And now Subway's got a whole campaign about it. I'm not a lawyer nor a tuna geneticist, so I won't comment on that. But what I can say is a lot of the data they're using is the type of thing we'll be talking about for the last part of this talk. How do we make sure that when we say we're delivering, whether it be Rice Krispie treats or whether it be something completely different, like how do we make sure that accounts get disabled? How do we make sure that people aren't using summer 2021 exclamation point? If that's your password, you should go change it right now. How do we make sure that that's not happening? Well, we need to put controls in place that actually validate the problem, that actually go through and say, well, wait a minute, if this does happen, this is how we will catch it. And we need to force failure. We need to stop being afraid of failure. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about not being afraid of failure. If you were there for the pre-show banter, you would have heard us talking a little bit about Wild West Hackin' Fest. And one of the things that I love, that I adore, and I'm really glad, and I hope we can keep this pandemic under control and get it back under control so we can continue doing these things. Because one of the things I love is I sat down at a random table during one of the dinners, and I try and make a point of that, where, there's people that I know, and I'm like, okay, I'll catch up with them, but let me sit down at kind of a random table. And I sat down at a random table, and there was maybe 1 or 2 people there at this 8-person table. And we just say, hey, what do you do? What are you here for? General banter. And one of the people was a contributor to this book, and they were talking about security chaos engineering. And I said, I've heard this term, but I don't know that I fully understand it. And it feels maybe like it could either be the next blockchain, or it could actually be something relevant. And if there's crypto kids in there, I'm sorry, or it could be something relevant, right? And they were able to explain it to me in a way that I'm like, oh, this is like a subject of a talk I'm about to do. Like, I didn't realize that there was already a framework for some of this. Now, this is all focused on engineering, but we're going to actually pivot it into how we would test controls for compliance. So it turns out this individual is one of the contributors to the book. And not one of the authors, but one of the contributors to the case study. But I would highly, 150,000 recipes are great. Don't use that password either. So it's Security Chaos Engineering. It's by Aaron Reinhardt and Kelly Shortridge, and absolutely phenomenal book. And one of the pieces that we're going to take out of it today is Chapter 2, Decision Trees, making attacker math work for you. So what is that? Basically, the concept is this. In security chaos engineering, when you are protecting an environment, you don't look at what Kelly calls YOLOSEC, where you say, we didn't really do anything, and now the API is cached, and the attacker got the S3 credentials, etc. Here's all the things that, as the attacker meets a wall, as they say, MFA's turned on, so brute forcing won't work. What do we need to do next? What's the next likely attack path that will let us get to our goal? Okay. So that is like a core fundamental concept of security chaos engineering. You need to identify all that. What is the path that an attacker would take to get to their goal? Now let's think about, what is the path that an attacker would take to get around compliance controls? What would cause a control to fail? And then let's build tests for it. Because in the end, we're all solving the same problem, right? We're trying to keep attackers out of the environment. We're trying to keep our data safe. As Mikko Hyponen said very, very elegantly, we're no longer securing society. We're no longer securing computers. We're securing society. See, I can't say it elegantly. They can. They know a bunch of languages. So we can go through and we can build this. We can build that technical compliance to say, if EDR is supposed to be protecting us, how do we know that EDR is deployed? If encryption is supposed to be protecting us, how do we know that's on all the laptops? If an attacker hits EDR, and Black Hills does an amazing webcasts and blogs around, hey, how do you get around Carbon Black? How do you get around Trend? How do you get around, McAfee and this and that and the other? When they hit those controls, what is their next decision? Well, I can't do this, so I will do that. If the control fails, what's the next thing that's supposed to back it up? What's the next thing that should happen? How would it get detected? And you keep working down that decision tree until you've built tests to say, great, this is how I know EDR is deployed. This is how I know antivirus is deployed. This is how I know the IPS IDS is working. Sounds a lot like purple teaming, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound like maybe the compliance team should be involved in that as well? Yeah, absolutely. So keep looking over at the Discord. So let's make a decision tree, right? Let's actually talk this through for a compliance control, right? Because if we can teach people to think technically about failure, that forensic accountant that can look at it and say, well, wait a minute, that should add up to 1,000,005, and it's, 1,999,994. Where's that $6? And find it. That little gap is often what the attacker uses. Remember, they only have to be right once. You've got to be right every single time. So how do you determine that you've done everything that you're supposed to do? So in the links to the PDF, I highly recommend going to two things. If anything I'm talking about appeals to you and you say, yeah, I want to dig more into this. I want to really understand how the compliance controls relate to my red team work, or how red team work relates to my compliance controls, how my peanut butter and my chocolate make Reese's peanut, and well, it doesn't talk about that. But auditscripts.com has their collective risk project. Now, Kelly Charala did a great talk at Wild West Hackin Fest Way West just recently, measuring risk using the open source community. You can go watch that now. That video is up. Well, not right now. Like, finish the rest of my talk, then you can go. But you can watch that right now, and you can hear more about how this risk project tracks these different areas that you should be thinking about in an organization and where they apply to different risk frameworks. Whoever was in the Discord chat said, oh yeah, this speaks to the board. This speaks to the board. I can tell you right now, most boards have sat down and had some conversation with KP Waterhouse, Deloitte and Young, about the NIST cybersecurity framework and a maturity model. That's tracked here. You can say, hey, if you're doing this, you're meeting these compliance standards, right? So we're going to look at one specifically. Hey, Kelly. So I even got your link in there. I told you, I loved it. So I was emceeing with Joff when I was there, and I was like, this is amazing. It was one of the unpopular opinions. That's where it came from, is that, technical audit is going to, is needed. So forgive me, let me get back on track here. So auditscripts.com, in that framework, there is the log management system, and log 06 says this: utilize an automated system to regularly review the organization's centrally aggregated logs to identify potential threats to the organization's information system. So what is this focusing on? Do we have the logs? Show of hands in the Discord, shout at the sky, send a carrier pigeon, whatever you're going to do. How many of you have investigated an incident, tried to figure out what's going on with some goofy server, applications crashing in the middle of the night, and you go to find the logs, and the logs are either not there, they've rolled over, or they don't contain the detail you need because they're misconfigured? And if you've worked in IT audit, compliance, or anything for any amount of time whatsoever, I would be shocked if the answer wasn't yes. That, oh, we didn't turn that on because the logging overloaded the server, or we don't have enough storage, or we don't have, whatever it is to get that level of detail. We can turn it on now if you need to investigate, but we don't have it, right? This is the kind of thing that this framework has you start thinking about, right? You can say, all right, if I'm going to meet log 06 so I can meet CIS Control 8 or 7 or 7.1, or that NIST CSF framework, that cybersecurity framework, if I'm going to meet the CMMC, which I'm just starting to learn and really get into. But if you're going to meet those terms for HIPAA or whatever it is, you're going to have to answer this question. How do you do this, right? Let's actually talk about that. So here's my super advanced how a decision tree is often thought of. So validate log sample. Okay, so your auditors come in. I'm now seeing the thumbs up and whatnot. So yeah, you're seeing the auditors come in and they say, yeah, we need to see that all your PCI systems are sending logs. And you say, great, yeah, here's our logs. Here's a screenshot of them, and here's a sample because we have thousands of point of sale machines. So here's a 10% sample. Often your auditor will set the example for that. They'll say, we only want 10% and give us these systems that are listed inside of your scope. So you go through and you find the logs on those systems. If they're missing, that's a finding. They get the rotting crop out, which I threw somewhere. I don't know what I did with it. But we get the rotting crop out, and they're like, oh, we've got a finding. That was actually pretty decent, Arnold. Or if they're there, they say, yeah, okay, checkbox, you passed, cool, moving on. Does that actually solve a problem? Does that tell you anything definitive besides you put forth a hypothesis and the test result was true? No, it really doesn't. The only thing you solve for in that challenge is passing the compliance audit. That's a lot of effort wasted for that result. So what does this decision tree really look like? And now this isn't exhaustive, but this is what we're going to talk about. What does this decision tree really look like? It looks a lot more like this. Validate log sample. If you were building a test case, you might go in and say, okay, I want to go look at all of my logs. Do I even have them? Oh, wait a minute. This server has sent no logs to Splunk or Logarithm or Graylog or NameSeam or log aggregation tool here. It's sent no logs here. Why? Why haven't I seen logs in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months? Why haven't I seen these? Oh, they were removed. Well, how were they removed? Why were they removed? Okay, well, wait. No, they weren't removed. They were misconfigured. They never got here in the first place. They were never configured. That's why we have no logs. How come they were never configured, right? Or you have no logs, like total failure. Like they were configured and the configuration was right and the storage was there, but maybe the policy was wrong. Yeah, you didn't get any logs. It was configured to send logs, but the policy that said this is a log file you need to store just wasn't there. It said, well, thanks for your log, but I'm not storing you. You deal with this a lot with preprocessors, where whether you've got Splunk licensing issues or storage issues or whatever it is, you say, let me just, we're going to trim out some of this before it goes into the database because, resource-wise, whether it be money or bits and bytes or electrons across a wire, we can't solve for X. We cannot take this data in. So we're going to put a preprocessor in, and that's why you didn't get the logs, right? So they're missing. So going back up to the top, their log's missing. Okay, are they missing detail? Like they're there, but they're missing detail. Okay, well, why are they missing detail? Is this something that could be configured? Or, my favorite, it's not supported, right? Maybe you've got a translation there that says, okay, well, to convert this log into Splunk or into this tool or whatever. I love that Discord is actually moving by faster than I can read it because that's good. So the configuration not supported. That's where we're not supported. The vendor says, yeah, if you, and I'm going to pick on someone because they don't support any conferences I'm involved in. So a guy by the name of Larry Ellison in a small outfit out of California called Oracle. I think they're out of California. Either way. They are just the kings of, oh, you want to get data out of the system? Well, you need to use our Oracle connector to get that level of detail, or you need to use our Oracle logging system to get that level of detail. Well, we'll send you a log, but it's not going to have the level of detail that our log would have, so you're going to need the connector. So it's not supported. And you say, okay, well, how much is that? And they go, I just keep putting money in our hand until we say it's heavy enough. That's a problem. So you need to go back and say, well, do we want to dump money into their hand for long enough for them to get another catamaran, or do we want to do something else? We could actually go down this path in an incredibly long way, but we really don't have the time. The idea here is to say, at each of these questions, how can we go through and build a test? How do we test it? How do we make sure that we know that, wait a minute, not only were log files configured to send to the scene, but they're also sending the right level of detail? How do we know that there's enough storage there? How do we know that we're meeting those standards? How do we know if a storage drive is about to fill up? Once you start chaining all these things together, you start to get these test cases to say, for us to be compliant, we need to have a test that ties together, hey, the drive that has logs on it doesn't fill up, and we get a warning, because if that drive fills up, we stop getting logs, which means we're out of compliance, and that might lead to a finding. That is a technical piece that you can test. Hey, we have an incident, and these are the logs we have available. Are these enough? Hey, we forced a failure. We turned off logging. How long did it take for the system and a technical control or a person doing a manual audit to detect it? You know what the wonderful thing about findings are? They're not findings if you discover them, right? Well, technically they are. But the way that it is reported with most auditors, if you say, this was part of a test, in the same way that, you go through and say, we are going to test this, and that's why those logs aren't going there. Now, mind you, you would really want to do this in a development environment that isn't part of your scope, et cetera. But if you can go through and with your testing prove in your production environment, we turned this off and we're watching it with a different control. So if you find a failure here, that is by design. Here's why. because we're making sure that we're testing. Have you ever seen this? There's videos, go watch them on YouTube. Again, in about 15 minutes, go watch them on YouTube, where they test airplane engines and they rev them up faster than they're ever meant to go. And they specifically put a manufacturing defect in a blade. And that blade flies off and explodes. And the test that they're running is to make sure that the housing around the engine, I hope none of you are flying or are going to be flying, the housing around the engine absorbs that impact and doesn't throw the blade into the cabin, causing structural damage that causes the plane to crash, because it's probably a multi-engine plane and can fly one plane engine and land. You have to embrace that level of failure. You have to go through and say, we're going to wreck this. Facebook did this a while ago, and I'm not a big Facebook fan, but I applaud their chutzpah. They said, all of our data centers are redundant. They'll fail over if one fails. And they said, how do we know? We've never done it. And they said, okay, let's try. So they literally, they unplugged a data center from the internet, from all the private circuits and whatnot. And yeah, there were some little hiccups, and people were like, oh, hey, my posting didn't happen quickly enough, or, whatever it is, whatever you're doing on Facebook. But all in all, the system absorbed the failure. That is what you want to test. That's what you want to build your compliance controls around. So let's go back to that chart again and look at it. So what would we build, right? So let's go to the logs missing. If I know that I have to have, yes, Shining, that is exactly what I'm talking about, the GIF in the Discord. So let's go back and actually run some tests. Let's take the MITRE attack framework and throw it at that system, or the Canary tools, or not Canary tools, or the Red Canary's Atomic Red Team. Throw that at the system. Take Scythe, take Bryson Port and Georgia stuff. Take all that. Throw it at the environment. Did we have the appropriate level of logging detail to know what they did? Now you'd say, well, that's purple teaming. That's what you do, right? But the compliance checks, once that's built, can be run all the time. It doesn't have to be a purple team exercise. You can go through and say, hey, we know that the logs are there because we threw logs at the system and tested it, right? So you can go through and say, no logs. What happens when we cut off the logs, right? Let's turn them off. Let's see what happens. Just like the data center at Facebook, what actually happens? We expect that someone will detect it. Do they? Do they know that logs are no longer coming in that should? You have to go through and take these pieces and break out each individual one in the same way that if you're on the red team side, you start to think about the cyber kill chain, and you start to think about PTOS, and you start to think about your attack path. How am I going to get to my target? And if you're on the blue team side, like I said, you're using that cyber kill chain maybe, or another methodology to say, if I stop you at these 10 points, you will be stopped. Well, with your compliance frameworks, you need to do the same thing. If I test these 10 things technically, repeatedly, regularly, I don't need to do an attestation. I don't need to go, oh, look, we did a point in time this quarter, and all the names that are supposed to log into the system are there. Yeah, you may still need to capture that, sure. Just like AV in PCI, even though you've got, something better. But if you've got the controls tested, you're going to be incredibly confident that that list is right every single time. That's what we need to attack. That's the piece that we need to attack. So, but what about vendors, right? Ian, in the abstract, you said you were going to talk about vendors. Well, we are. So glad you asked. So compliance teams often are tasked with the unenviable, especially now with the avant-garde of supply chain attacks, of saying, hey, how do we know our vendor's safe? How do we make sure that they're doing? And there's plenty of checks you can do. You can say, give us your SOC letter, show us your PCI compliance. You have a pen test report you can share under NDA, whatever it is, because you're doing due care and due diligence. You're just trying to make sure that the people that are going to have your customers' data are responsible with it. But let's say you're dealing with a smaller org. They don't have a lot of this stuff. They're not ISO compliant. There's some startup that's doing something amazing that can help your company, but they don't have the level of security that potentially you need. And the answers you're getting don't necessarily jive. You don't have to be technical to use a tool like DNS Dumpster, which is the main one I have on the screen here. You can test if someone is responding to your compliance surveys and says, yeah, we don't have any other vendor relationships that have your data. Oh, that's interesting. It shows that you've got a CNAME that sends you to ServiceNow under your DNS records. Does any of our data live there? Any tickets, any CMDB information, anything like that? Oh, hey, it shows you're using Office 365 because I can see that your email MX gateway is pointed at, it should be MS 365 now. It's pointed there. What's the relationship there? I've seen ones where in doing audits where, yeah, it's MS, you've got Office 365 there, but then they've still got MX entries for their old, GoDaddy or whatever their service hosting provider was. And they say, oh, yeah, no, we do still use that for some people. Okay. Will our data be there? Shodan ranges. If they go through and say, hey, great, this is our offices, this is where people will be working out of, and we need VPN access. Great. What's your perimeter IP range? I'm not going to scan it, but guess what? Shodan's already done it. I can teach anyone, compliance, red team, anybody to go to Shodan, do a quick Shodan search and say, hey, whoa, look at all these vulnerabilities that are on your perimeter. Are you sure you're ready for our data? Like, you told us that you're completely compliant with all these things, but this doesn't add up. You can have plugins in your browser that say, hey, here's information. You can use Crunchbase to say, hey, here are the founders of the company, et cetera. Google News, all of that to find out more about the company that you're working with and build that in. So the last unpopular opinion, we got about 6 minutes left, and I want to make sure we wrap up on time. So again, leet. Your CVE doesn't protect companies or data. Sorry, it doesn't. It's cool. It's amazing. I'm very proud of you personally, professionally. I'm very proud of you. It is neat. It is cool. It's very important security research. It does not protect companies. As a matter of fact, it probably stresses them. It probably goes through and causes more problems than even potentially they have to deal with. I can tell you the number of times that even though a large news world-ending CVE goes out in the news, I've got to spend time researching, does this impact us? And turns out it doesn't. That takes resources and time away from the type of work that I'm talking about. That's the rote work that actually helps secure an organization. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't important. I'm not saying it's not great. I'm saying that CVEs are awesome. They do not protect an organization. So you can return back if you were doing the lead. So I want to start leaving you with some final thoughts here. So keep this in mind when you are thinking about compliance and building technical controls that test each phase of this information, right? Businesses are in the business of taking risks. That's what they do. That's how they turn their companies, how they create profit. Somebody invests some money in people, capital, they build an idea, it's sweat equity, whatever it is, they spend that time, that resource, whether it be teams, people, large organizations, whatever it is. And every day there's a different risk. Can we pay the power bill? Can we pay this? Can we acquire this organization? What is their security posture? They do this all the time. So if you come at them with, hey, this pen test failed, okay, how do we fix it? It's just another problem for them to solve. But if you can put it in the context of business risk, and you can build compliance controls that speak to them because they have to deal with those regulations, now they can start prioritizing it. We need to do this because our regulatory framework says that we have to do that. We're a publicly traded company, and without these controls, we can't meet this compliance standard. And this team's telling me that they can make sure we don't fail those audits if I give them X, right? So you got to understand the business impact. And if you do not understand how to translate your job to business impact, you're going to have a real problem, real bad. So I'm going to pump Black Hills again and Mr. BB King. If you have not watched this talk, go watch it. A lot of those themes are in there. Hack for show, report for dough. I make all my students watch it. Or I suggest to them, it's not actually an assignment. But I make all my students watch it, right? To say, you're not paid for the hacks. You're not paid for all that. You're paid for the report, right? So make sure that when you're reporting on compliance, technical controls, penetration testing, whatever it is, that you've got it dialed in. So in summary, a regular repeating technical control audit is better than a penetration test. Now, like I said, regular and repeating. You got to build those technical controls so they operate all the time. How do we know that everything's got EDR on it? How do we know that all our certificates are good? How do we know that those things are there? We need more forensic accountants. I love accountants. I really do. Because you can drop a pile of paperwork on their desk and go, figure out where the decimal place isn't. And they go, that's just what they do. That's how they're wired, right? We can use those people to apply them to security. We know the controls that can save us. We just don't test them. Security chaos engineering is the way. Compliance needs to be more technical. Red team, you're going to need to know more compliance, and compliance, you're going to need more technical. And remember, you belong here and we need you. Last couple thoughts. My career is that of curiosity. Never say no. Always say yes if. And remember, businesses are in the business of taking risks. Now, if you're still with us, please, if anything I said sounds interesting, put it in the Discord, because we are looking at, or I'm looking at developing a 2-day training around this, where you will look at a real fake company, one that's actually online. You will go through and run through some of these steps of building and testing controls. You don't have to be technical. And one of the sites, it's been online forever, is RedProx, that I use for a lot of this stuff. And it's a real fake company. So shout it out on Discord. Let us know if that is something that you would be interested in. If you've got compliance teams or whatnot that might be interested in a course like that, let the Black Hills folks know. Velda just said it in the chat as well. Like I said, the last thing is Hype Beast here. B-Sides Orlando Bite-Sized. We are doing something incredibly cool. Please submit your CFP. You will get to work with folks live in stream, like Deviant Olaf, Hannah Kane, Ian Coldwater, solving challenges live, learning from them and being coached by them. Go check that out. And then, of course, Wild West Hackin Fest, come hang out with me, and we'll do more of this kind of stuff, or you can watch the previously recorded talk there. So there's my contact info. I'll leave it up on the screen for a little bit. I think we're right at time. So very much appreciated, everyone here at Black House. And of course, as I mentioned there, because I have to call out, everybody, especially Velda and everyone on this call, but the dreamiest community manager there is, Jason Blanchard. And I hope he's somewhere feeling embarrassed and ears warm right now, because I love him. He's great. That's it. That's the show. I can do my Ferris Bueller.
Awesome, Ian. Thank you so much for the amazing talk. There's, as you can see in Discord already, a ton of great response, a ton of people who are very interested in the 2-day course you were mentioning as well.
Oh, there's Jason. There he is.
Oh, yep.
Excellent.
Hiding in the chat.
I'll hang out in the Discord for a few minutes here, and then I have to go back to the regular real day job and make the monies. But I will hang out there. And before we go, anyone think, I did have more of a Jim Gaffigan kind of tone today, where he goes back to Ram Tough. In the one bit he's talking about trucks, but I guess something just me. I don't know. Cool. Any other questions? Anything I can answer? I don't know if we have a couple extra minutes or if we need to shut down the stream, but either way, I'll be in the Discord.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't see any questions that need immediate answering. If there are any questions, you already said you'd hang out in Discord for a little while, so that's awesome. I do just want to thank everybody so much for joining us here today. I want to remind everybody that we do have a ton of classes over at Antisiphon Training, some of which are pay what you can. The others are super affordable. Velda, did you have any last words?
No, I just want to thank you, Ian, for being with us today. Really appreciate you. Excited to see you again in Deadwood, and let's get that class underway. Looks
Awesome.
like it could be popular.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sounds
yeah.
good. Cool.
Great.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you all in the next one.